Well, I've had a great morning of two interesting talks, approaching the subject from different starting points, both being makers and working with material and thinking about counting and mathematics, everything within that. I wondered before, I mean, I've got lots of questions. We wanted this to be a kind of open discussion as much as possible. If people got any burning questions they'd like to fire at us about our presentations, because you've not had a chance yet, and then we can sort of build a discussion around that. If there are people who have something burning, something that's making them angry, frustrated, or complimentary.
Can I just ask,
is there another microphone, or have I got...
Well, it's a very simple question. Can everybody hear me?
I think they're going to record, so if people could wait for the mic, that would be great.
I'd just like to ask, where is your project with the English Folk Song and Dance Society documented? Is it only the film? Because I looked on your website and it was nothing.
Oh no, it's there. It's
right.
There's a website called textilefolksong.co.uk.
Okay, so it's on there.
It's on there, and there's all the documentation from the project, and then there's links to the digital archive at the English Folk and Dance Song Society, and then there's a whole list of textile songs on there, so you can start to search by subject matter. If you're into knitting, or you're into spinning, or you want a song about weaving, and that's the kind of archive that's building as we go along. So visit that site. Sorry you couldn't find it through my site.
Well, it's
there
just
you go.
That on the details for today that were sent out, most people put their web link.
Yeah.
But yours went to a Tumblr link,
yeah.
and there was nothing.
So anyone who could help me with that later. I'm in the right place. There's a lot of people, so sorry, but yeah, it's there. So if people want to search it, there's lots of info there on textile related songs. Thanks. Anyone else? Oh, go on, Alex.
Yeah, I was interested that you both mentioned the number 24, which I thought was as being nice in some ways. So I think there's something interesting about nice numbers when you're working with them as material. Another thing that I thought was really interesting in all the presentations and your video was the sort of relation between the world of numbers and the world of social relations, and how they kind of blend in the project. So I just thought I'd throw those two thoughts in as possible sparks for discussion. It's not really a question.
Yeah, no, 24 is a really good number. It's just so divisible.
Why is it a good number? I'm not a mathematician, so why is it such a beautiful number?
Because it divides by 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 and 8. So you can have multiples, so you can split it down into lots of different sized repeats within that. Is that the same reason for you?
No, actually, I've never really given much thought to the maths side of it at all. I'm an absolute maths phobe, but of course with cross stitch it's all about counting, and if you can count then you can cross stitch. And yeah, when you were doing yours actually I kind of thought like, oh yeah, it's really maths actually what I'm doing. But it's just something I've been doing since I was a kid and I've never really thought about it. But yeah, 24 does come up like quite a lot. 6s, 12s and 24s do seem to come up.
Oh yeah, and 12 as well. Sorry, missed out a fact.
Yes, it's interesting. The sort of Yantan Tethera system is, if I get it right, it's based on 5s, isn't it? So 4 digits and then the 5th number. So Yantan Tethera, well, Nididel, where I come from. Yantan Tethera, Yantan Edera, Pedera, Pits, Tata, later, Overa, Covera, Dix, and then 1 and 10. Yandix, Tandix, Tetheradix, Mederadix, Bumfit, Yana Bumfit, Tana Bumfit, Edera Bumfit, no, Overa Bumfit, Covera Bumfit, Jigit. So that's a system based on 5s and 20 being the limit. So the mathematicians out there, is the 5 system a good one? It's a precursor to digits, I suppose, digital system.
Yeah. For knitting, it's rubbish. It's just rubbish. Yeah. Oh, it's all uneven and odd numbers and even numbers and
Right.
yeah, it'd be rubbish.
Sorry, question there?
What are the actions that the weaver or the textile person is doing in response to those 20
Oh, well, that's
things? Does 20 make sense in terms of what they're doing, or does 5 make sense in terms of what they're doing? Is there a sequence that they're trying to follow that
well, that system that was continued to be used by shepherds predominantly.
right?
So they would count up to 20,
Okay.
and so the rumour has it they would pick up a stone, and that would be their score. So 20 is their score, and then they'd count up to the next 20, and either pick up another stone or transfer the stone from the left hand to the right hand, and count up to 100, and then they'd have 5 score, depending on how number of the sheep. So that, or they'd mark a cross on a stick, perhaps on their shepherd's staff or something. So that's how, in terms of counting out. In terms of knitting, because there's people in the same communities we use for knitting, and I haven't been able to find any research. Perhaps people here know, in terms of knitting, if they were using it for the same system, how would that translate? Whether they just use it purely as a counting system to count the number of when they're casting on and off, I don't know. But perhaps people here know more than I do about that.
I do have a question for you though.
Oh.
In the songs that you were using in the project, were they motivational or informational? If you see what I mean, so the songs that knitters or weavers were singing, were they that kind of, so Rachel in the video talks about having to keep yourself going through the night, or so is it about keeping yourself going and kind of the common experience, or is it more about, or does it involve information that can be kind of orally passed on?
I think there's a mixture of both. There are those songs which are sung which have nothing to do with the activity that you're doing, but are motivational, and they might be hymns. There's a big song culture of singing hymns while people were weaving or making. And then there are songs which people would sing in their leisure time, which are songs about their work, that have come out of their work, that maybe a weaver had written, or spinners particularly were known for their singing. And then there are work songs, which are instructional. So people might know the walking songs of walking the Harris Tweed in the Hebridean Islands, where you're fulling the wool once the tweed is made, and the women would sit in circle and beat the wool, the tweed once it's made, to shrink the tweed, and that would absolutely follow this rhythm. The songs are made up as they go along, and it could be they're just talking about what's happened that day, that week, and these songs get passed down. But the rhythm would absolutely follow, the tempo would follow the action that they were doing. And similarly, the only real sort of English textile working songs are lace tells, and I don't know if people know very much about lace tells, but if you're making hand bobbin lace and you have your pillow with your lace bobbins on, lace tells were sung in time to making the lace as your bobbins fly over. And there's a beautiful song, a lot of this was these songs were collected in Bedfordshire, and there's a beautiful song that starts 19 long lines hanging over my door. We could all sing it together. Or maybe later. And it goes, 19 long lines hanging over my door. The faster I work, it will shorten my score. But if I do say it will stand at my say. And that will be something about my wedding day. And then they sing all the way down, and they sing this as they pass the promise along. And then they get to 18, and they go, 18 long lines hanging over my door. Then 17 long lines hanging. And so that's the kind of song that's absolutely based. And that's really the only, I've not been able to find another English, I mean, sea shanties are the other working English song, but in terms of textiles, lace tells. And it's a beautiful tradition, and the songs are beautiful and interesting and funny and witty and subversive. And I did some workshops recently with a group of lace makers in Bedfordshire who've kept the tradition of handmade bobbin lace, but the songs have been lost along the way, and I think it's really interesting that they're carrying on the tradition of making, but the songs that will be the things that provided the rhythm and structure and a communal activity have lost and fallen out. And part of this project was about trying to get people within their own history to think about something that's integral, and these songs were useful counting systems. There's another beautiful one, an older version of One Man Shall Go and One Man Shall Mow. What's it? One Man Shall Shear His Wethers, which is a beautiful communal knitting song, and people would sing it while they knit, and again it sort of goes, one man shall shear my wethers, one man and no more, shall shear my wethers, my ewes, my lambs, and count the wool together, count the wool together. And then it goes, two men shall shear my wethers, two men and no more, shall shear my wethers, my ewes, my lambs, and count the wool together, count the wool together, two man, one man and no more. And then it goes on and on and on, so you know, like 12 songs. 12 songs of Christmas. So anyway, that's enough for me singing very badly. But this goes to prove that you don't have to be a true amazing singer to sing a folk song.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, there's a question. I was just going to say, because we talked a little bit yesterday about whether makers still sing, and I was thinking maybe the songs that we need now are songs that remind us to experiment, that not to follow the pattern, and to colour outside the lines and all that kind of thing. That was my thought of what songs we might need, because once something's written down, it becomes very fixed, and people do. It's the same with traditional knitting. So there's a traditional form of knitting called Sanka, which comes from the town of Sanka in Scotland, which is a two-colour knitting pattern, particularly associated with gloves. And at some point in the past, somebody documented their particular Sanka knitting patterns, and then that becomes like the authority, and people think that they can't experiment and deviate from it, and they get really obsessed about recreating that exact one, when the point of it was a kind of communal thing. And it's that thing about things getting documented, which links to folk songs as well. I think that the documented version becomes the authoritative version.
Yeah,
so yeah,
the orthodox. Yeah.
Maybe if you could make up some songs that remind people to
to break rules.
It was just a quick one to Sharon, really. In terms of knitting and weaving, there's a certain order and process, and you work row by row.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of cross-stitch, but I certainly never followed the rules. And I'm just curious, when you're talking about there's going to be gaps in your piece at the end, are those kind of pre-empted? Do you know where they're going to be? Is there a certain order that you have to work on something that's more abstract?
I didn't mean to decide in advance where they're going to be, but I'm really uptight, and like I just couldn't let it happen naturally. So I know where the gaps are.
Is there some like preemptive, so if you're doing cross-stitch, you sort of work with the dark colours through to light or anything like that?
I've got a really weird system going actually, because it's a massive cross stitch, and usually you just go left to right and then back right to left to make your crosses. But doing that along, like it's a square metre, so doing that for a whole row is just massive. And especially when most of it's gold, and gold's just like the worst thread in the world to sew with. Just unravels and breaks really easy, it's horrible. So I've kind of got this weird system where it's coming down in strips, and within that there's rows. So I'm going kind of from left to right in strips. Yeah. I've had to make a system, and I'm kind of learning as I go, because I did start doing the big strips as I usually would, and then I was just like, oh my god, what am I doing to myself? You just feel like you're making no progress when you're doing a metre long line and you're not coming down your fabric. So it's kind of more like a mental sort of easing to feel like I'm making some actual progress coming down the fabric instead of always slowly going across left to right. Yeah, it's very much winging it.
There's another question at the front here.
It's just a quick one following on from that, because you said you're using gold. So is it conductive?
No, it's actually it's like nylon inside it, and then it's just got a metallic sort of thread wrapped around it. It's called metallic thread, but I don't think it's metallic. It's more like tinsel, like sort of Christmassy tinsel stuff. And the reason it's so bad is because the tinsel's wrapped around the nylon, and then the bit of tinsel kind of splits, and you can see the bright yellow inside, and it's just not very well made. Probably actual gold thread, gold sort of wire would be easier to sew with in a way, but I can't afford that.
your kind of work. Is it because of the way the works has been changing the traditions or the culture, or even the rituals that they hold on to? Has it been changed too much?
With the cross-stitch groups, not liking it, do you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know actually. It took me by surprise that it got such a bad response, because I do use social networking a lot to promote my work, and I just thought, like, I'll join some Facebook groups and spread it around as I usually would, but they just don't like it, and I think it's because it's too art. It's too art for the cross stitchers, and they like the kits, and they're very like comfortable in what they do. I've heard some wild stories of people using their own shade of pink instead of what a kit recommended, but that's about as off-piste as they go. But I am surprised sort of how much it's gone down like a lead balloon in some groups. So like I say, like, I've been kicked out and told it's inappropriate to talk about, like, especially the DNA side, where I've kind of put the pattern on and I've said this is a project I'm doing. I'm legit. There's a gallery involved. It's not just somebody who's like after your money. It's all free, and I'm just told it's inappropriate for the group, which is strange. And one of them were called something like it had a really good name, like Alternative Cross Stitch or something like that. They don't want me anymore. But there you go.
I was just going to say, because in the research project I'm working on at Leeds, I'm thinking a lot about tradition, and I think sometimes people have the idea of tradition is that it's fixed and it has to stay being fixed, when in fact that's exactly the opposite of what traditional is. Because for something to have stuck around long enough to be traditional, it has to have evolved because life has changed. And it can be hard to remind people of that, I think. So they feel like they're like carrying the torch of some authentic kind of traditional thing, when that's the direct opposite. I went to an event earlier this year that had some, it was primarily kind of folk music people, and they had some really nice quotes about tradition, and one was that tradition is tending the flame, not worshipping the ashes, which I really liked, and the other one was the deeper the roots, the further the branches can go before the tree falls down. And I found that really encouraging in terms of kind of evolving and experimenting, that if you're working with something that's a really long tradition, actually it's really well rooted and you can mess with it. You can mess with it more than you could mess with something maybe that's got quite a short history. I don't know if you found things like that.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I mean, I think, because I've been interested in samplers and sampling and all that kind of process for a long time, and when you go and look at the sort of early 16th century Italian samplers in various museum collections, particularly in the Victorian art museums, a lot of those were done by men, highly skilled artisans, praised for their work. But there's a lot of the early ones that you see, these what become known as spot samplers, were sketchbooks. They're places where they would trial, experiment their stitches, roll it up, take it away, add to it, trial a bit more, roll it back up again, unpick, rework, do. And it's interesting that the sort of traditional cross-stitch kit that we see of the house, with the garden, with the tulips, with the roses, with the religious text at the bottom, is very popular in Victorian times, has become this kind of staple of what people think of samplers. So if you actually go back to what people were doing even pre-16th century Italian samplers, it's very much about experimenting and trialling and unpicking and having it as a living archive that you take with you in order for you to be able to then create the pieces of work that you do afterwards and stuff. And I think a lot of that community haven't gone back far enough to be able to see how expressive and experimental it is.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I guess it's like in my PhD research, I was working with a group of knitters, and I was trying to, part of it was me encouraging them to design for themselves and talking about them trying things out and sampling before you try and make something. If you're trying to just go from start to finish making something, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, really, I would say, as a designer and maker. And one of my knitters said, well, there's no culture of playing around with wool for ordinary knitters. that culture doesn't exist. And so part of what I was trying to do was trying to encourage that culture, and I think Sharon's work shows that you have to be really diplomatic in how you go about that, because people will quite easily take umbrage that you're criticising the practice. And I've had it, I gave a talk at a knitting conference about encouraging people to knit their initials into things that they were knitting. And someone really had a go at me in the questions, because she was like, I really enjoy following a pattern, how dare you criticise me? It was like, I wasn't saying you had to, it was just a sort of suggestion that you might like to. And so I think I've become more and more gentle over the years in how I suggest to people that they might possibly want to do this, it's not a criticism.
Right.
And I think you have to be quite gentle in encouraging people to experiment. But then it is quite interesting to get people's backs up as well.
I wouldn't be as harsh with cross stitches as I've been here today. Actually, I wouldn't turn up and tell them that I don't think it's creative. I don't think I'd dare. But yeah, I mean, at the end of one workshop, this lady came up to me and she said, but it's not cross stitch if we're not cross stitching. And because I say things like, you can paint it onto fabric if you want, you can use other materials. And she said, but it's not cross stitch. And I said, well, it's looking at cross stitch in a new way, and I consider it to still be in the same field because we're looking at using traditional materials in a new way. I don't think there's anything wrong with pushing things in a forward-moving direction and experimenting, even if it's a bit rubbish and you don't like what you make. Like, at least you're trying something new. So it's quite a delicate thing to coax people out of doing what they think they should be doing.
Sorry.
I just really want to make an observation about the communities that you all three represent in a way. The embroiderers community. We have the Embroiderers Guild. Do you have any particular relationship with the Embroiderers Guild? Do you go to their...
No, I've tried to get them involved in this project, and I think I heard back from 2 or 3 guilds who are working on it, but the majority have kind of said no to it. And I've been chipping away at Women's Institute as well, and some of them have kind of got involved, and it's little steps to get bigger institutions involved. And I'm always free to come and work with groups, but they don't particularly want me to, so I'm just kind of leaving it at that.
Well, the other community are the quilters, because essentially they're stitching.
Yeah.
And the quilters are, as some of the embroiderers are very experimental. I mean, you only have to go to the quilt show in Birmingham to see the extraordinary, and the European art quilts, for example. Some of them it's difficult to even call them quilts. But there is this, both these communities, I would agree with you, are hidebound by conforming. But I find this rather strange because art education, and particularly in textiles in the UK, is very much focused towards individual creativity. Whereas in America it's not. I mean, this is, in the UK, this is the place to train if you're a knitter. And I say that from experience as a weaver who undertook a course in this country, where one was constantly being told to break the rules and to be creative. So I find it's rather a strange situation.
Well, that's the art school thing, isn't it? Like, at art school, you're taught to break the rules, but you're also taught that you're different to an amateur. So I studied fashion. If you're told that something looks dressmakery when you're studying fashion, that's not a compliment. And so it's cultures, again, it's implicit cultures of if you're art school trained, then you're allowed to experiment. If you're coming from a culture where you learn to knit from your mum or your grandma, then what knitting is becomes, you get your pattern, you get your yarn, you get the needles, you do exactly what it says, because at the beginning of the pattern it says do exactly what it says, otherwise it won't come out right and we can't be held responsible. And so the same knitter who said there's no culture for ordinary knitters of playing around with wool, actually it was really striking how quickly that group of knitters did start to sample and became comfortable with the idea of experimenting. And when I went through my recordings of the workshops we did together, there was time after time, oh, I'd have to try it out, I'd have to sample it, I'd have to see, oh, we could try this, try that. And afterwards, that same knitter said, I get it now, I get why I would sample, and I feel like I can do it. Before, it was something that designers do. It wasn't something that I could do. There was a sense that she would have been sort of being pretentious, like sort of trying on the clothes of being a designer, a textile designer, where through the project it created a safe space where it was okay. It wasn't pretentious. You weren't pretending that you'd been to art school. It was something that was perfectly viable to do as a normal, non-art school trained knitter. And so I think it's trying to, recognising the difference between those cultures and sort of, creating a sense of permission is something I'm really interested in.
Yeah, that's really very good. Thank you.
That's it. Just a sort of, there's another question at the back. Just to follow on from that, and I'm just interested about breaking the code, if you like, breaking the rules, and you both do that within your, or a scribe do that within your work, but there's a framework within which you are breaking the rules. So the framework is still there with your, Sharon, you know, you're using an Ada fabric at the back, and you're stitching, you're doing a cross stitch within that fabric. You're not moving outside the fabric. You know, an embroidery can be a meeting point of two threads that can hang in a three-dimensional space, and but you're sticking within a kind of framework of that, and you hacking into a piece of existing garment. Again, there's this framework, isn't there, that's still there. So how do you feel when does that framework and limitation offer the opportunity to break the code rather than just going freestyle from the beginning? Is it more interesting?
Yeah. Well,
sorry, I'll come to you.
Yeah. You need the lines to be able to colour outside of them. Yeah. If there aren't no lines, you can't colour outside of them. I really like the rigour of the knitted structure and messing with that. It's that if you start with a blank piece of paper, you know, most people would be, you know, stuck as to where to start. So, and I suppose I like working within something, so that the knitted structure itself is rigorous, as in you have to engage with its construction, but then also you've got all of that kind of cultural baggage that comes along with it, which I like as well. I like messing with that and reminding people that, like all of those reknitting techniques I worked out, reknitting was part of knitting in the past, because if you spent ages knitting a fisherman's husband's jumper or whatever, and it's got raggedy cuffs, you're not going to knit a whole other one. You're just going to replace the bit that needs replacing. So it's sort of engaging with both of those really nice, meaty sort of structures gives you a more potent area to work within, I think, than just going completely freestyle.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you need rules before you can break rules. And the grid, I really like the restrictions that the grid gives me, and in that way I think you can play around more, again, like looking at traditional methods and materials in a new way. It's reusing that gridded fabric in a way that's appropriate to the work I'm making, rather than just that it just so happens to be a gridded fabric. Gridded fabric. It distorts images in a way because you've got these squared edges, or maybe you're trying to lose the squared edges, like the one I was doing that's a circle. You can't really make a circle, so you've kind of got to work with the restrictions it gives you. And I think it gives you more interesting results then. But I did have one lady get in touch with me online, and she said, you know, how can you say it's not modern, or whatever, however she put it. She said, have you not looked at using other kinds of fabric? And she mentioned like a fine weave linen. And I said, well, no, I want to work on Ida. I like the squares, I like the grid. I'm looking at using it in a new way, not rejecting what's been before. I'm interested in what's been before, and I think that's quite important to reimagining work, is also sticking with the traditions that it has as its roots as well.
Sorry, thank you. There's a... Please, you've been waiting very patiently. Please.
I've tried cross-stitch and embroidery, and I'm equally competent at both. But I can see and feel that there is quite a big difference in the way you work and how that influences what you might want to do. And the only other parallel I have in my life is kind of music. Sometimes I like to tinkle the ivories, and other times I like to play the guitar.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like to actually think about what I'm playing and try and play either the same music on either instrument, but then as a competent musician as well. Quite, well, they sound rubbish, but I just find it incredibly thought-provoking. And I'm wondering if I took more time with a cross-stitch and embroidery, I'd probably find that equally rewarding.
Yeah, I think a lot of the creative process in maybe doing a cross-stitch is making the pattern rather than sewing the work. And like you kind of say, sometimes you just enjoy playing rather than it being good. I don't know, that sounds a bit harsh. But I think it's nice to switch off actually and just relax, and I do find cross-stitch relaxing. It's something I like to sit and do, and the work's gone into the pattern making. I think there's nothing wrong with just enjoying the process of stitching. Don't know if you find the same with knitting as well.
Yeah, I find that knitters sometimes talk about like different modes of making that's within knitting. So some people really enjoy the relaxing mode, that kind of rhythmic, repetitive thing that takes you into a bit of a sort of meditative space. But if you're designing something and figuring it out, it requires a lot more concentration. And the same if there's certain knitting tasks that I found the knitters in my research group distinguishing between relaxing knitting and concentrating knitting. Concentrating knitting, you have to turn the big light on. That's the definition of it. No one talk to me and put the big light on. Whereas relaxing knitting you can do in front of the telly. And so I think that, like, is this thing of inviting people to experiment and colour outside the lines, but recognising that requires more of the concentrating mode of making. And if that's not what they're after, then I think that's when people might take umbrage, because they know what they're getting from it, and they're kind of shaping their making experience to suit that. And so you've got a kind of variety in what you like doing. Some people are much more to one end of the spectrum than another. So some people who I've talked to are like, oh, I used a pattern once and I hated it, and I went straight away into experimenting for myself. And to other people, that would seem terrifying. And so it's kind of, recognising that within each activity, there's actually a whole span of approaches, and people select the one that suits them, I suppose.
I understand both perspectives on this, in that I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I spent my life at art school learning the rules and then studying people like Bob Gill, who said, forget all the rules about graphic design, including the ones on this book that he wrote, which was a witty perspective on it all. So I understand about the breaking of the rules side of it. I'm also now moved into game-based learning and Minecraft. Now, Minecraft let me draw in parallels here with what you guys are doing. It's grid-based, you can only build in straight lines, so curves are a problem, which is kind of interesting in itself, and it can be based in patterns and algorithms to create things. But also, the success of Minecraft in its own area is a free space for people to play. So giving people the freedom to do what they want and just go build, go make, go create is a really powerful concept. But equally well, we can draw parallels with things like Lego, where I was just talking to my colleague here about this. Some people like to follow the Lego pattern. They'll make the Lego object, they'll put it down and walk away. That's their comfort zone. That's what they are doing Lego for. Other people like to go, I want to build something amazing out of Lego and construct something that's never been made before. And the same with Minecraft. Some people follow videos religiously and do the thing they've seen. And then other people just go and build amazing things in Minecraft. So my question, you kind of answered my question already again, because my question really was about, do you think that the guilds and the people who are approaching are of the set that we are in our company, this is what we want to do, this is what we are getting out of it, and that's why we don't want to break out of it. So maybe talking to other people, maybe younger people who don't know the rules, haven't learned the rules, haven't been told what to do, just give them a needle and a thread and go make, go create.
Yeah.
What's your experience of those kinds of people?
I've done, I did a workshop at Leeds Art Gallery, and that were kind of just open to anyone who passed by. So it included kids as well, and that's the first one I've done for kids. And they really engaged with it. Some picked up a needle and thread, and they just made up their own patterns. I mean, there were a kid who was about 3 years old, and he was doing a sort of mirrored pattern with his, where he was putting his crosses with colours he was using. It was amazing. I couldn't believe he was doing it. And it makes a difference. But what I wanted to do through the workshops is meet people who don't cross-stitch, but the people who come across stitches, so it's difficult to get over that hurdle. And I think because people think it's a bit twee and a bit rubbish, it's hard to kind of say, like, it's not, just come and have a look and see what we're doing. It's hard to reach out to that kind of people. And as for the guilds and places like that, I think, again, it just falls into a no man's land. Like, they've got their thing going on, I've got my thing going on, and they just think it don't fall in our sort of remit or whatever, and it just kind of misses out on these groups in that way. Like you were saying before with the quilters and that sort of thing. I'm doing a workshop in Wolverhampton, and there's a sewing guild there, and they said that it's not creative enough for them. So it's obviously falling through a gap somewhere where it's not creative enough for this sewing guild, and it's too creative for that one, and it's just difficult to, like, just get someone to turn up and do it.
We have to finish there, folks. Thank you very much for your questions, contributions. Keep those building blocks going in the spirit of sharing and enabling other people to do it. So I'd like to thank Amy and Sharon for this morning, and I think we're going to have the next presentation before we break for lunch. So thank you for now. Okay.